Hello and welcome back to the Cartoonist Studio on an extremely windy day. It's blowing a hoolie out there. Seriously, there are people flying past the window as I speak. They are. And there's cats and dogs with them. They're everywhere. Right, so today's cartoon, what are we going to do? Well, for those of you who are regular viewers to my channel, already know that I produce a series of videos, and there's a playlist, if you want to go and check that out, called What If I Drew ... and then I draw a well-known cartoon or cartoon characters from a graphic novel, what have you. I've already done the likes of Andy Cap, Hagar the Horrible, BC, Wizard of Id, Asterix the Gaul, Calvin and Hobbes. These are the ones I've done so far, and today I'm going to be having a go at drawing a Far Side cartoon. But a Far Side is the one that I probably wanted to do a lot, not the most. I mean, I wanted to do with Calvin Hobbes. That was what I really wanted to do, and I've done that. You can see how I got on with that once again if you go to the playlist. There'll be a link in the description below for the playlist, then just scroll your way through. Gary Larson I've always wanted to do, but I kind of put it at the back of my mind because he had such an original sense of humor or cartoon strip. Effectively, it was a single panel, but his humor was just one of a kind. There was no one out there doing what he was doing. Jim Unger, who produced Herman, reckoned that he was the first of the off-the-wall cartoons, and he probably was, but even his humor wasn't the same. He was a bit weird in his stuff, but he wasn't not the same level as Gary Larson. He was a one of a kind. That's what I'm saying. So to write a joke, and that's the thing about these cartoons, is I don't copy an existing cartoon. I write a joke in the style of the cartoonist. So I really make it difficult for myself. I've not only got to draw their way, I've got to write their way as well, or do my best to do that, based on what we all know. So I've had a good old crack at doing what I think Larson may have produced. I'm not saying he would have done, but it's in that kind of vein. Now, I will openly admit, it's a cartoon I've already drawn myself in my own style, and you can get it online from Cartoonstock. But going through them, I did create a cartoon about the devil. He was very big on drawing cartoons about Satan. But I just couldn't get the joke right. It wasn't really working for me, and I wanted to do justice to Gary Larson because his style and drawing were nowhere near an influence to me, but his plucky little attitude of the guy who just fell into cartoons and then made it so astronomically big, but on his own terms. You've got to admire someone like that. So I wanted to do justice to him. I didn't want to do anything that was a half-hearted attempt. So I went through my cartoons and saw this. I thought, well, yeah, obviously that was a Larson-inspired joke. So I've redrawn it, but in Gary Larson style. And I hope you enjoy it. If you do like it, obviously give the thumbs up, hit the notification bell, share it. We are trying to build this channel. And I've had a follower say that I need to be doing much more detail, much more of the process. So this cartoon, it's pencil stroke by pencil stroke, dip pen stroke by dip pen stroke, all the way through. And also halfway through, before I go from penciling to inking, I'll go through the tools that I think he would have used. So that's great. So that aside, shall we go ahead and see how I can mess up a perfectly good Gary Larson cartoon? Let's go and do just that. Right, Gary Larson now. He was a very simplistic approach to the cartoon strip, as did people like BC. But whereas Johnny Hart with BC very much knew the process involved in cartooning, Gary Larson literally just dropped into it. It was one of those things he tried, it worked, and he did it. But obviously he was destined to be. It's almost like fate. They say that things are fated to be, and no matter what you do, if it's going to be that way, then it's going to be that way. And I guess The Far Side, or Gary Larson, was a classic example of that. He obviously had a very warped mind, which was ideal, an ideal mind for a cartoonist. And he had a very funny brain. And you put those two things together, and it's the perfect alchemy, shall we say, to create a top cartoonist. And if you put him next to the other big cartoonist of the day, which was Bill Watterson, the two couldn't have been further apart if they tried. I mean, they both had tremendous imaginations, but their execution and their art style and their abilities were just poles apart. But Gary Larson was silly. Maybe it was, he says in one of his books that his brother, I think it was his elder brother, used to lock him in the basement and make all sorts of horrible noises and tell him there were monsters down there. What that must do to you, I have no idea. But he says maybe that was part and parcel of what turned him into what he is. He had a great love of science, of animals, of insects, of everything like that. And they say, write about what you know about. So he drew about that, but he drew about it in such a way that's it's just you can't explain it. If you could explain it, you could bottle it. If you could bottle it, we'd all be multi-millionaire cartoonists. But he did it for 10 years and said, you know what, I'm off to do what I want to do, which was travel around the world and just enjoy his love of nature. Anyway, all that aside, he made it, and he made it big. God bless him, he deserved everything because his cartoon was good. But that aside, I decided to do a Far Side cartoon. Now, he did have certain themes or character types that he would go back to. Like I said, he loved science, so he did scientists. He had quite an obsession with a lot of cartoons about Satan and people's, usually famous people's, idea of hell, shall we say. He had the cows, of course, the little boy that he drew an awful lot. So he had cavemen as well. So I knew that if I was going to draw a Gary Larson cartoon, it had to be something that you would sort of readily associate with him. And to me, probably, well, initially, as I said in the introduction, I had an idea that involved Satan, but when it came to the wording, it just became very, very laboured, and it didn't quite work out, and I wasn't too sure, so what do I do? And I just scrapped it. And then I was just flicking through a book of mine, which is Out of the Primordial Inkpots, which is a book collection that I happen to have out on Amazon. And I found this cartoon in there, and I thought, you know what? It was written by me. I thought, God, yeah, that is very, very Larson-esque. So that was why I decided to draw it. I thought, no, this is the one. This is great. It's the scientist. It's a very, very Larson-style cartoon. Now, all I have to do is take my idea, but redraw it in his style. Now, a little bit about his style. Obviously, he didn't draw in the conventional way because he wasn't brought up studying cartoons like us conventional cartoonists are. So when we break a style down, we tend to break it into shapes. And it was a little bit more difficult to work out, say, Gary Larson's style as opposed to Asterix the Gaul or Peanuts or Garfield or BC or Hagar the Horrible, any of them. But what I eventually found out was if I gave him a kind of a squashed balloon head and then an almost bell-shaped body with these very thick or fat legs and clunky shoes. And then I went to his character design, his facial expressions, and I realized that he probably had, I'd say, a catalogue of maybe 10 or 15 faces. But he also had separate ones for scientists, separate ones for cavemen, separate ones for farmers and what have you. So I worked on that. Then finally, I had to work out his panel format. And because he wasn't classically trained as such, he didn't draw the panels, say, the way that the Marmaduke one was, or Dennis the Menace, or any of the other ones. So he just literally put characters where he thought they'd fit. So when I came to do it, I had to break my natural understanding of the panel and composition and try and draw it the way that he did. It's very difficult because I'm having to unlearn everything so as I can do it in his style. Anyway, those are the basics of it. Now we're almost coming to the end of the penciling now, and I'll just talk a little bit about the tools that I think he would have used. Right, onto the inking. Now, it's difficult to work out exactly what Gary Larson used with his inking. By his own admission, he wasn't a technical cartoonist, shall we say. He kind of fell into it. He did a variety of jobs, and then the one day he drew a cartoon and sent it off, and it got published. And he said that the heavens opened and the angels sang and said, "Lo, thou shalt be a cartoonist," or something like that. So he wouldn't have gone through the technical process that so many other cartoonists go through, like learning how to use pens, dip pens, brushes, and so on and so forth. So I guess he would have sort of scrabbled around and sort of seen what people were using. So I've come up with the three options. Now, the dip pen I use, which is it's the classic old school one, which is a Gilliatt 303 nib, or Gilliatt, or however you pronounce it, but basically Gilliatt 303 nib. This is the one that Charles Schulz used. So I thought it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I use that when I do dip pen. I draw largely in brush. There's videos about it that I've got if you care to go through my back catalogue. I tend to go through phases of drawing with a pen, and then other ones were drawn with a brush. At the moment, I'm going through a long stretch of the brush. I love affair with it. I'm doing nice things with it. I'm happy. So at the moment, I'll probably stay there. But I could go back to dip pen. So it's there when I'm ready. Gilliatt 303. So that's that one. He may have used that. He may also have used the version in its day of just a normal marker pen. His lines are very thin. There's no thick and thin. There's no form or style to them. They're just literally very, very functional. So I would say that maybe he used one of the earlier versions of one of these. That's another option. And then the third option, which is just a mapping pen. Now, this is a modern one. I'm going to be doing a video on the modern pens versus the classic pens, probably sometime in the new year. So that's one to look out for. But for the sake of this drawing, I did do a little sample on the Gilliatt 303, and I think the line was a little too thick. So I'm guessing that he probably used a mapping pen of some sort. I could be wrong, and if there's anyone out there who knows the difference, leave a comment below, because I honestly don't know. I'm just going by what I've seen. He also drew his cartoons probably larger than I do. I've drawn it on a sheet of A4 smooth cartridge. He probably drew it on A3. A lot of cartoonists did then. Like I say, he wasn't a natural cartoonist, so he would have scrabbled around for the advice of those who have been doing it for years. And they would have said, Bristol board's the way to go, A3, draw it, blah, blah, blah. I draw smaller because I prefer the detail. So that's just me. So I'm used to drawing it that way, and that's how I produced the Gary Larson cartoon that you've already seen in pencil and you're about to see inked. So, mapping pen. That's what I reckon. Right, let's go back and see what I do with that, shall we? Okay, we're back. Right, that's basically what I reckon that he used. But like I say, I'm not 100% sure. I can only go, as in with the other cartoons that I've drawn, I've looked at the line, I've studied them in the books and in the newspapers, and made the best educated guess based on a knowledge of what brushes do, what dip pens do, what marker pens do. So it's just based around that. And of course, the time that he was drawing it was in the 80s, 90s. and there wasn't a huge amount of choice out there. Actually, while we're on the subject of materials and what have you that he was using, I've always been asked in the comment section about what it is that I use. So, for the sake of this, would you like me to show you what I use? Yes, we got that very much. I thought you would. Right, let's go and have a look, shall we? I draw on Dana Jesus Christ, I'll get you. Dana Rowney, and it's a smooth, heavyweight cartridge paper. And I think that is 200 grams or 130 pound is the weight. I buy A3 because I can always cut it down to A4. A3 I use for the comics pages. Then I'll cut it in 4 and I'll do the single panels on that. So that's what I use for the paper. The ink, that's varied from over the time. I tried to do what the Americans use, which is an ink called Speedball, and I really didn't get on with it. Now I've got, well, it proves I used it, because there's the original bottle, the Speedball bottle. I washed it out, and I now use Winsor & Newton's ink, India ink, and I find it much, much better. I did have problems in the summer with it clogging up in the brush, so what I do is that periodically throughout the summer, I just add just a few drops of water and mix it up. It kind of thins it down, but it doesn't grey the ink. Don't put too much in there because it will just make it grey. Some artists use watered down black acrylic. That's another thing. I've never used that, never tried it. Maybe I will one day, I don't know. But at the moment, black India ink is what I use. And I use a brush to ink with, but in this particular cartoon, I'm using a mapping pen. All these things I can use. And then the pencil is just a normal propelling pencil. I did have a very fancy one once, but when I bought this cheaper one because I didn't have the fancy one, I found out it worked just as well, because basically it's a HB lead, and that's the other thing. It's HB lead. And I use a putty rubber. So there you go. Normal ruler. Actually, I've got a metal ruler, because if you're cutting things with a knife, it's best to have a metal one, because the plastic one you can cut into it. Then it makes the lines you draw very uneven. Metal one, knife's not going to cut into it. So I use a metal ruler, or rule, or whatever you want to call it. And that's pretty much it. Oh, if I do balloons, word balloons on cartoon strips, I'm getting it out now. I've just got a series of ellipses. I tend to only use these 3. Very rare I might use those 2. But just you buy those in art shops, Amazon, whichever you want, whichever your preferred route is. So that's the art materials that I've used for today's cartoon. Okay, back to it. There you go. Now you cannot say that I don't tell you what I draw with. Right, so back on with the cartoon. I pretty much said what I wanted to say about the drawing of Gary Larson's style. The rest is just me obviously inking. Sometimes I speed it up, but this time I think I'm just drawing it in real time. So I guess that gives me a bit of a chance to tell you my Gary Larson story. In the years that I was trying to break into the cartoon market, I would sometimes get in touch with the established cartoonists. I got in touch with Jim Unger, who I mentioned earlier on, drew a cartoon or a cartoon panel called Herman. And I liked his style of drawing. And I know that a lot of cartoonists used an assistant. So I thought, well, perhaps I can get into cartoons that way. If I can become a syndicated cartoonist assistant, then I'm closer to I'm actually in the business and close to getting my own cartoon strip published. I'd also be able to have ideas and go and see the cartoonist, and if he or she liked it, they're more than likely to mention me to their syndicate editor, and it goes on like that. So I contacted Jim Unger. I drew a few of his cartoons, drew a few of my own jokes, to be honest with you. I drew it in his style, sent it off. And I got a very nice letter back from him. He said, that he doesn't use an assistant, or rather, he wasn't using an assistant. He loved my brush strokes. He thought I was very talented with that, and good luck. So I thought, okay, well, fair enough. Then I also read that a lot of cartoonists get noticed by writing gags for existing cartoonists. A lot of the more established ones, like Beetle Bailey, for argument's sake, they would use script writers. And, they just get these scripts going. Garfield, classic case, struggling to make it as a cartoonist, then employs writers, artists, and God knows what else, and doesn't do a great deal himself anymore. Well, not as much as he should do. He's in a privileged position. I would be drawing the cartoons all the time. I'd be like Schultz. But a lot of artists don't do that. It's a personal preference, I guess. So I thought, right, send in to them. So who do I like? I love Gary Larson. So I sent a bunch of cartoons into him, and he also very kindly replied. It wasn't a form letter. It was definitely a letter from him. I'll always remember it. I wish I still had it, but I don't. I'll always remember it. He said he doesn't use gag writers. He said because he's got his own individualistic style of writing, and he's pretty sure that there wasn't a book out there called 1001 Weird Ideas. So he just wrote his own material, and brilliant it was. And another Gary Larson story, some of you may already know it. I mean, this wasn't anything he told me. It was in one of his books, and it just epitomised him. It's quite a sad story. It's quite a horrible story in some respects, particularly if you're a dog lover. But it just went to the centre of what he was, of the kind of things that happened in his life that he noticed, and they were sort of lead to the weirdness in his ideas. Before he was a cartoonist, he was trying all sorts of jobs. He loved animals, so he applied for a job in the Humane Society. That's the American version of what we in the UK have, the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. In America, you have the Humane Society, same thing. So he applied for a job, and he went into it. He went in there, had the interview, felt very good about it, came out, got in his car, reversed out, and drove over a dog. And that, he said in his own words, ended his career in the Humane Society. Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed the video with my drawings and inane witterings. And if you have, then hit the notification bell, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Let people know about this video. Let's grow the channel. I say it all the time, and I mean it. I want this to grow. Okay, so there's a few minutes left of the video, and just like to say one thing that I'm looking to do in the month of December, which will be the next Friday, I suppose. I'm going to be producing, for the month of December, one cartoon every week. It's going to be themed, naturally, and that theme, surprise, surprise, is Christmas. So I'm doing at least 2, possibly 3 watercolour pictures. The first one being a very close-up of Santa Claus with a bit of snowy scenery in the background, and that'll be quite nice. And the second one, I'm going to be drawing a panel and having Rudolph holding up a glass of beer or something like that with his big, bright, shiny nose. That's the other one. And the final one, now this one, I'm not sure whether it'll be a watercolour or not, but it's going to be my Christmas card to you, my faithful viewers and followers. So that will be it. And then I'm going to take a bit of a break over Christmas. I'm coming back in the new year, where I'm not too sure what the first one will be, but I'm thinking it's going to be cartoonist versus AI. Oh, that sounds fun, doesn't it? It's where I just literally find one of these free AI sites. I give it an instruction, a prompt, say for argument's sake, a dog chasing a ball, and I'll see what it comes up with, and then I draw what I would do if a customer had come to me and given me a brief, and how I would think the process through, and how I think that a human being is better than a faceless, cold-hearted computer. Whatever happens, I think it'll be an interesting video. I have no idea what the outcome will be, but whatever it is, we shall share it together in the new year. Hope you look forward to viewing that as much as I'm looking forward to doing it. Right, so that's it, I guess. So thanks once again for your valuable time, and I'll see you on the next video. Until then, bye-bye for now.